From Coup to Deportation, NPRC Strongman Charles Emile Mbayo returns to Sierra Leone. Welcome to the Bold African Voice, BAV, your trusted channel for deep analysis, Africa-wide comparisons, and forward-looking perspectives on the issues that shape our continent. I'm Ahisatu Kamara Kargbo. Today, we confront a dramatic twist in Sierra Leone's history: the deportation of Charles Emile Mbayo, a former NPRC coup leader from the United States, back to Freetown. What does this mean for Sierra Leone's fragile democracy, for Africa's justice systems, and for the future of leadership on the continent? Stay tuned as we unpack the story. On August 20th, 2025, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, executed the high-stakes removal of Charles Emile Mbayo, a former senior figure in Sierra Leone's National Provisional Ruling Council, back to his homeland. Accused of orchestrating, or at least abetting, extrajudicial killings during the junta's violent grip on power in 1992, Mbayo's takedown typifies U.S. efforts to deny sanctuary to alleged human rights violators, the historical echo when military coups left deep scars. The NPRC seized power from President Joseph Momo on April 29, 1992. Within mere months, the regime orchestrated the execution of about 29 individuals, suspected coup plotters and government figures, in a brutal purge that ended in a mass grave. Mbayo is widely alleged to have had a central role. Across Africa, the NPRC's purge is not unique, but unfortunately, part of a broader tale of military coups, followed by retaliatory or preventive bloodletting. From Liberia's Samuel Doe regime to Uganda's early post-Amin era, the continent has witnessed a heavy human cost when power changes hands by force rather than ballot. U.S. immigration law meets war crimes allegations. Mbayo entered the U.S. on January 9, 1998, via an F-1 student visa. He later applied for permanent residency, which was denied in July 2023, culminating in his arrest by ICE Homeland Security investigations on June 30, 2025. His removal, carried out by the Detroit ERO, was framed as a critical checkpoint in America's commitment to public safety and national security. The deportation reflects how U.S. immigration policy has gradually tightened loopholes that once allowed alleged atrocity perpetrators to slip into American anonymity. Since 2003, ICE's Human Rights Violators and War Crimes Center has issued over 79,000 lookouts and blocked more than 390 suspected perpetrators from entering the U.S. forward-looking Sierra Leone at a crossroads now, back on Sierra Leonean soil, courtesy of U.S. authorities. The pressing questions are, will Mbayo face legal reckoning, or will political caution cloak his return? Some observers worry that President Julius Maada Bayo's administration, ironically led by another former NPRC figure, may treat Mbayo's return with deafening silence rather than judicial action. That would align with certain post-conflict states' tendencies towards silence and selective amnesties as tools of fragile peace-building. Across Africa, the dilemma is strikingly familiar. Countries like Rwanda and Liberia have faced similar crossroads. Should post-conflict restoration prioritize restorative justice, think truth commissions, or retributive justice, courts and trials? Mbayo's case could tip the scales decisively, either toward transformed rule of law or back toward toxic impunity. Comparative landscape. Who else is paying attention? Kenya has, at times, grappled with the legacies of post-election violence leaders who escaped accounting by virtue of structural amnesties. Sierra Leone's own Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, did recommend amnesties in service of reconciliation, but critics argue that true peace requires accountability, not just forgetting. South Africa, by contrast, offered conditional amnesty via the TRC, spiced with painful public confession, a model that held some, but not all, perpetrators to account. The Mbayo moment may represent an opportunity, big enough to redefine Sierra Leone's post-war trajectory, Will it show that even decades later, no one is beyond moral and legal accountability? The political irony: old friends, new headaches. Here's where it gets awkward. Sierra Leone's current president, Julius Maada Bio, was himself a junior NPRC officer back in 1992, later becoming head of state before handing power to civilians in 1996. Imagine a courtroom scene where the prosecutor says, "Your Honor, we call our next witness, the President of the Republic." It sounds like a Nollywood script, but Sierra Leoneans know this irony all too well. The question is whether Bayo's government has the appetite to prosecute, or whether Mbayo will simply fade into the background under a politically convenient blanket of national healing. In African politics, silence is often louder than accountability. The African mirror: impunity and selective justice. Mbayo's case isn't unique. Across Africa, deported strongmen, coup makers, and warlords often arrive home to mixed fates. Liberia's Charles Taylor's associates faced international trials, but many lower-tier operatives re-entered society quietly. Chad's Hissène Habré, after years in exile in Senegal, was tried and convicted of crimes against humanity, a rare African example of accountability. The Gambia's Jammeh boys, deported from Europe and the US, have faced a slower reckoning, with victims still waiting for justice. In other words, Africa's justice system often resembles a lottery. You either get a golden ticket to exile or a cold seat in The Hague. The people's verdict: streets versus courtrooms. For Sierra Leoneans, particularly survivors and families of the 1992 extrajudicial killings, Mbayo's return could reopen painful wounds. The nation's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, already documented the NPRC's abuses, but its recommendations gathered more dust than action. Civil society activists are now pressing for Mbayo to face justice. Yet skeptics argue that the same ruling elites implicated in the past hold the keys to the courtroom today. One Freetown lawyer wryly noted, "Asking them to prosecute Mbayo is like asking a crocodile to become a vegetarian." Forward-looking, will 2028 elections change the game? Sierra Leone heads into another election in 2028, where transitional justice, or the lack of it, could become a litmus test for democratic maturity. If the ruling party sidesteps Mbayo's alleged crimes, it risks cementing Sierra Leone's reputation as a country where big men escape justice, while ordinary citizens get punished for stealing a goat. Comparatively, Ghana has used political changeovers to revisit past abuses, while South Africa institutionalized reconciliation as part of its democratic DNA. Sierra Leone could still surprise the world by putting Mbayo on trial, or at least using his return as a catalyst for long-delayed reforms in transitional justice and human rights. Africa-wide implications: deportation as diplomacy. The U.S. deportation of Mbayo also signals a broader trend. Washington increasingly uses immigration enforcement as a form of justice by proxy for African conflicts. Translation: if you escape the rebels, the coups, and the corruption, don't think you can hide in Detroit. Humor aside, this creates a moral dilemma. Should the U.S. and Europe serve as the world's exile police, or should African states finally develop the institutional backbone to try their own war criminals at home? Regional ripples, ECOWAS, and the AU on the spot. Sierra Leone is not just any country in West Africa. It's a poster child for post-war recovery under heavy donor supervision. ECOWAS and the African Union, AU, now face a test. Will they encourage Sierra Leone to confront Mbayo's past, or will they retreat into their usual safe script of African solutions for African problems? Translation: bury it and move on. Let's not forget, ECOWAS has already been juggling political fires, from military juntas in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso to tense elections in Guinea. Adding Sierra Leone's unresolved war crimes into the mix is like tossing a match into a fuel tank. But then again, ECOWAS leaders have perfected the art of pretending to hold fire extinguishers while sipping palm wine. Donor diplomacy, justice versus stability. Western donors, especially the US, UK, and EU, face their own dilemma. They poured billions into Sierra Leone's peace-building efforts after the Civil War. If Mbayo strolls freely down Lumley Beach with sunglasses and a cold Star beer, it undercuts every rule of law workshop ever funded. This isn't just Sierra Leone's problem. If donors allow selective justice here, they weaken their credibility across Africa. Already, China and Russia are circling with offers of no questions asked partnerships. If the West fumbles, Sierra Leone could quietly tilt toward alternative patrons, trading human rights lectures for infrastructure loans and military aid. Justice, in this sense, has become geopolitical currency. Risks of impunity. Lessons from elsewhere. History teaches us that ignoring war crimes is like sweeping scorpions under the rug. You only delay the sting. In Liberia, delaying justice for warlords kept fragile peace but allowed corruption and factional politics to fester. In Kenya, lack of accountability after the 2007 to 2008 violence deepened mistrust in institutions. In Chad, the eventual trial of Hissène Habré proved that delayed justice is still justice and set a rare African precedent. For Sierra Leone, letting Mbayo off the hook risks signaling that the country has abandoned the promise of never again that followed its brutal civil war. A forward path, justice that heals, not divides. What can Sierra Leone do? A hybrid approach might work. A special domestic tribunal backed by ECOWAS and donors to handle NPRC-era crimes. Conditional leniency if Mbayo fully confesses, South Africa's TRC style. A truth-telling process that honors victims while avoiding endless cycles of revenge. Crucially, any move should be transparent and citizen-centered. Otherwise, Sierra Leone risks recycling the culture of impunity that fuels instability across the continent. A light note amidst the gloom. Some Sierra Leoneans are already joking. If Mbayo escaped justice for 27 years in America, maybe he should run for parliament. He seems qualified. Dark humor aside, the underlying truth is sobering. Without strong institutions, Africa risks normalizing the return of war criminals as political elders instead of prison inmates. The youth perspective. Why this matters for a new generation. For many Sierra Leonean youths born after the war, Mbayo's name may sound like a relic from dusty history books, yet his return collides with their future. This is a generation already burdened by joblessness, rising food prices, and dwindling faith in politics. Adding the spectacle of an alleged war criminal walking freely in Freetown could deepen cynicism. In WhatsApp groups, young Sierra Leoneans are already buzzing with memes comparing Mbayo's deportation to a Netflix series, where the villains always return for season 2. Underneath the jokes lies a sharper question. If leaders from the war era remain untouchable, what hope is there for true change? Transitional justice versus political convenience. The return of Mbayo exposes Sierra Leone's unfinished transitional justice puzzle. The Special Court for Sierra Leone, SCSL, tried RUF and AFRC leaders, even jailing former Liberian President Charles Taylor. But NPRC-era crimes were carefully sidestepped. Why? Because many NPRC veterans transitioned smoothly into civilian politics, blending into the democratic landscape like chameleons on green leaves. This selective justice undermines the very idea of fairness. Imagine a football match where the referee only blows the whistle for fouls committed by one team. The game might go on, but fans will eventually storm the pitch. Implications for the military today. Mbayo's story also raises awkward questions about Sierra Leone's current military establishment. The NPRC years still cast a long shadow, with some former junta men occupying quiet but influential corners of society. How the government handles Mbayo could send a signal to today's officers. If impunity prevails, it whispers that coups and abuses can be forgiven with time. If accountability follows, it reinforces the principle that military loyalty belongs to the Constitution, not ambitious young captains. This lesson matters not just for Sierra Leone, but for West Africa at large, where coups are once again trending like a viral TikTok dance. Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Guinea. The Mbayo affair could either strengthen the message of civilian supremacy or weaken it further. The international dimension, beyond deportation. The U.S. has ticked its box. Mbayo is gone. Case closed. But the world will be watching what Sierra Leone does next. Already, human rights watchdogs like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch are rumored to be preparing statements urging accountability. Donors may also quietly tie aid disbursements to the government's handling of Mbayo. At the same time, there's the geopolitical chessboard. If Sierra Leone sidesteps justice, it risks being portrayed as a weak link in the West's democracy chain. If it pursues accountability, it could elevate itself as a model for post-conflict societies globally. The choice is as heavy as it is symbolic. Civil society mobilization. The watchdogs awaken. Sierra Leone's civil society has historically been the loudest voice for justice, even when politicians preferred silence. Already, advocacy groups are debating whether Mbayo's deportation could revive the unfinished business of the NPRC era. Victims' families are expected to demand a fresh investigation into the December 29, 1992 executions. Many still carry emotional scars, with some survivors saying they want acknowledgement at the very least, if not trials. Lawyers' associations and human rights groups are weighing legal avenues, though they face the brick wall of Sierra Leone's selective amnesty culture. The media has begun framing Mbayo's return as a test case for whether post-war Sierra Leone is genuinely committed to rule of law or still playing politics with justice. As one Freetown radio host quipped, if Mbayo's deportation doesn't wake up our conscience, maybe we should deport it too. Reconciliation, fabric under strain. Sierra Leone's peace was built on a delicate balance of truth, reconciliation, and selective silence. The TRC encouraged storytelling and forgiveness, while the special court zoomed in on the worst offenders of the Civil War. But the NPRC episode was left hanging, like a book missing its final chapter. Mbayo's presence could rip open old wounds. For families who lost relatives in 1992, the idea of seeing him free in Freetown markets may feel like a betrayal. On the other hand, rushing into a politically charged trial without broad consensus risks tearing open divisions that have been papered over for decades. This is the paradox. Reconciliation is not static. Like a fragile clay pot, it must be protected from cracks. And Mbayo's return is a hammer hovering overhead. Africa-wide lessons. Déjà vu in different capitals. Across Africa, Sierra Leone is not alone in wrestling with ghosts of military pasts. South Sudan still battles with whether to punish or integrate commanders accused of atrocities. Central African Republic, CAR, oscillates between peace deals and prosecutions, with warlords sometimes sitting in parliament rather than prison. Ethiopia faces a similar test. Should accountability for Tigray war crimes be pursued immediately or delayed for the sake of political settlement? The Mbayo case is therefore more than a local story. It's a continental mirror. It reminds Africa that unpunished atrocities do not disappear. They linger, waiting for moments of political vulnerability to resurface. The waiting game. For now, Sierra Leoneans are watching closely. Will the government take action? Will donors apply pressure? Or will Mbayo quietly fade into the background, perhaps even enjoying a quiet barbecue at Aberdeen Beach? As one commentator half-joked, in Sierra Leone, cases like this are never closed. They just go on indefinite leave. Legal pathways. Can Sierra Leone actually try Mbayo? On paper, Sierra Leone has multiple legal avenues to address Mbayo's alleged crimes, but paper doesn't always match practice. 1. Domestic courts. Sierra Leone could prosecute Mbayo under existing criminal laws for murder, torture, or conspiracy. The hurdle? Gathering evidence from events that took place more than 30 years ago. Witnesses may have passed away, memories faded, and records accidentally lost in smoky archives. 2. Special tribunal, a hybrid tribunal backed by ECOWAS or the African Union, could focus specifically on NPRC-era abuses. This would echo the special court model but on a smaller scale. It sounds nice, but the political will and donor money would be hard to find, especially when global crises are pulling attention elsewhere. 3. Truth for Amnesty Mechanism, a modified version of South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Mbayo could publicly confess, seek forgiveness, and face conditional amnesty. This would prioritize healing over punishment. Critics, however, warn that such a deal risks reinforcing the culture of impunity. Talk, cry, hug, and walk free. In short, Sierra Leone's toolkit exists, but whether the government picks it up depends less on law and more on politics. 2028 elections, justice or political football. It's impossible to separate Mbayo's return from Sierra Leone's upcoming 2028 elections. Here's why. The ruling SLPP may want to avoid prosecuting him, fearing that old NPRC skeletons could implicate figures close to the current administration. The opposition APC could use Mbayo as a campaign stick, painting the government as soft on justice and protective of old allies. Civil society and youth activists may mobilize around the case, demanding accountability as part of a broader governance reform agenda. In essence, Mbayo could become the most unlikely campaign figure of 2028, less because of what he says, and more because of how parties spin his shadowy past. Justice fatigue versus daily struggles. For many ordinary Sierra Leoneans, however, Mbayo's deportation might feel like elite drama. Ask the average street trader at Dovecot Market, and she might shrug. Justice is fine, but can justice cook my plazas? This tension is real. Sierra Leoneans are navigating high inflation, rising transport costs, and daily survival. For them, the Mbayo debate risks becoming another round of big man politics disconnected from their struggles. Unless leaders frame accountability as part of building a better future, one where impunity no longer drives poverty, the case could slip into apathy. The unfinished business of memory. Still, collective memory is stubborn. The December 1992 killings left a scar on Sierra Leone's conscience. Families of victims continue to tell their stories. Schools teach the NPRC years as part of history. And now, with Mbayo back in the country, the wound is no longer buried. It's bleeding again. Sierra Leone now faces a choice. Either stitch the wound with justice or cover it with another bandage of silence, hoping it won't infect the body politic again. History suggests infections have a way of resurfacing. Security sector jitters, old soldiers, new uncertainty. The return of Charles Emile Mbayo doesn't just stir history, it shakes the barracks. Sierra Leone's military has worked hard since the 2000s to reinvent itself as a professional, apolitical force, one that trades coups for peacekeeping missions. But the ghost of the NPRC still lurks in institutional memory. Morale question. For young officers, watching an ex-junta strongman walk free could send confusing signals. If yesterday's coup makers are today's elder statesmen, what's to stop tomorrow's captains from dusting off the coup playbook? Loyalty dilemma. Senior commanders who once served under the NPRC may feel personally implicated. A trial could reopen old networks of loyalty and resentment, making the army uneasy at a time when West Africa is already coup-prone. Civil-military trust. Sierra Leone's democracy rests heavily on keeping the army out of politics. Mishandling Mbayo's case risks eroding the fragile trust between citizens and soldiers. In short, how the government manages Mbayo is not just a question of justice. It's a stress test for Sierra Leone's post-coup military culture. International legal angles, The Hague waiting in the wings. If Sierra Leone's courts stall or collapse under political pressure, international mechanisms could step in. The International Criminal Court, ICC. While the NPRC atrocities predate Sierra Leone's ratification of the Rome Statute, the principle of no safe haven still applies. Creative legal arguments could open a door, though politically, this is unlikely without Sierra Leone's consent. Regional courts. ECOWAS's Court of Justice has taken bold stands on human rights before. Civil society groups could petition for regional intervention if domestic justice fails. Universal jurisdiction. European countries like Belgium or Germany, which have prosecuted African war crimes before, might one day assert jurisdiction if Mbayo travels again. For now, the ball remains squarely in Freetown's court, but international eyes are watching, and silence won't go unnoticed. Forward reflections. Africa's balancing act. Across the continent, Mbayo's deportation forces African leaders to confront an old dilemma with fresh urgency. Peace versus justice. Should fragile democracies risk destabilization by prosecuting old crimes, or preserve stability by burying them? Memory versus amnesia. Can a nation move forward if its past crimes are ignored? Or does silence guarantee their repetition? Domestic versus foreign accountability. Should Africa depend on deportations from Washington or Brussels to deliver justice, or build its own robust systems? The timing is also symbolic. As ECOWAS grapples with the rise of juntas in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, Sierra Leone's handling of Mbayo could set a precedent. Do ex-coup leaders face consequences, or do they eventually blend back into politics with new suits and old habits? One commentator put it bluntly: if Sierra Leone lets Mbayo off the hook, every young soldier across Africa will take note, and next time, they may not even bother hiding in Detroit. Grassroots voices, the street speaks louder than State House. While government press releases remain cautiously silent, Sierra Leone's streets, markets, and diaspora WhatsApp groups are buzzing. Youth movements. Activists argue that Mbayo's return highlights the broader problem of elite impunity. If justice is not served, they warn, it signals that power in Sierra Leone is still a recycling game for the few, not accountability to the many. One youth leader put it sharply: if the system can't prosecute war criminals, how will it ever tackle corruption today? Women's groups. Many women recall how the NPRC years worsened the insecurity that disproportionately affected them. For them, Mbayo represents not just one man's crimes, but the enduring invisibility of women's suffering in transitional justice debates. Diaspora communities, Sierra Leoneans abroad, particularly in the US, UK, and Canada, are split. Some feel vindicated that America deported him. Others fear he'll live freely at home, undermining the credibility of Sierra Leone's justice system. Grassroots voices matter because they amplify public sentiment. Politicians may try to downplay Mbayo's return, but civil society is ensuring it won't slip quietly into the night. Economic implications, justice, and the investor's eye. At first glance, Mbayo's deportation seems like a purely political issue, but in fragile economies like Sierra Leone, politics and economics are Siamese twins. Aid and donor politics. Donors who bankroll large chunks of Sierra Leone's budget may subtly tie future support to how the government handles this case. Justice isn't just moral, it's financial leverage. Investor confidence. Investors already wary of Sierra Leone's governance may interpret silence on Mbayo as another sign of weak institutions. Business thrives on predictability, not impunity. Diaspora remittances. The diaspora, which contributes billions annually, may become more vocal in linking remittances to reforms. As one diaspora activist wrote on Facebook, "We can't keep sending money home while war criminals retire in peace. Simply put, justice, or the lack of it, has a price tag." Humor and satire, coping with pain through laughter. Sierra Leoneans have a unique gift, turning tragedy into satire. Within days of Mbayo's deportation, social media lit up with memes. A cartoon showing Mbayo arriving at Lungi Airport, greeted not by police but by a welcome back committee holding star beer and cassava leaves. A TikTok skit portraying a mock immigration officer asking, "Sir, do you have anything to declare?" To which Mbayo replies, "Just 29 ghosts." A WhatsApp joke making the rounds. If America keeps deporting our past, soon we'll have to open a special old soldiers' retirement village. Dark humor aside, satire is Sierra Leone's way of keeping politicians on their toes. It signals that while people may laugh, they are also watching and waiting. Regional comparisons: how West Africa deals with its past. Mbayo's return is not unprecedented in the sub-region. Across West Africa, states have taken different approaches to dealing with yesterday's men who left blood on their hands. Liberia. After the Civil War, many mid-level warlords reintegrated quietly, but the failure to prosecute them has left Liberia haunted by impunity and cycles of corruption. Only Charles Taylor was sent to The Hague, while others now sit comfortably in politics. Ghana. After its turbulent coup years in the 1970s to 80s, Ghana avoided show trials but invested in strengthening democratic institutions. This created stability, though critics argue that it left some atrocities unpunished. Nigeria. Successive coups produced strongmen who were rarely tried. Instead, many reinvented themselves as statesmen. The lesson? Untouched histories breed recurring cycles of elite dominance. The Gambia. Yahya Jammeh's associates deported from the U.S., and Europe have faced limited accountability at home. Jammeh himself still lives in Equatorial Guinea, unbothered, while victims continue to demand justice. Sierra Leone now sits at a crossroads. Follow the path of selective silence like Liberia and Nigeria, or attempt a Ghana-style institutional strengthening combined with public reckoning. 3 future scenarios for Mbayo. 1. The trial scenario. Sierra Leone shocks skeptics by initiating legal proceedings against Mbayo. This would be a milestone for accountability, but risks destabilizing elites who fear their own skeletons being exposed. 2. The silence scenario. Mbayo fades into quiet life under government protection. Civil society protests, but the state prioritizes peace over justice. This would reinforce Sierra Leone's reputation for selective amnesia. 3. The rehabilitation scenario. In the strangest twist, Mbayo could be politically rehabilitated, perhaps even advising on security reform. While absurd, African politics has a long track record of recycling old villains into new power brokers. Which scenario unfolds will depend less on law and more on political calculation, donor pressure, and public outcry. Advice to African leaders. 1. History doesn't expire. Crimes from 30 years ago may feel distant, but victims' memories are still raw. Sweeping the past under the rug is not justice. It's a ticking time bomb. 2. Justice strengthens, not weakens. Stability, prosecutions. When done fairly, build trust in institutions. Selective silence only feeds cynicism and fuels coup temptations. 3. Don't outsource justice. Africa cannot forever depend on Washington, Brussels, or The Hague to deliver accountability. Building strong local systems is both a duty and a legacy. 4. Lead by example. African presidents who talk about democracy on global stages must also demonstrate it at home. Nothing undermines credibility faster than preaching accountability abroad while ignoring it domestically. 5. Balance. Justice and healing. Accountability doesn't always mean jail. Creative mechanisms, truth commissions, reparations, public confessions, can blend justice with reconciliation. Key messages in summary. The deportation of Charles Emile Mbayo from the U.S. to Sierra Leone reopens unresolved questions about the NPRC era and transitional justice. His return tests Sierra Leone's legal system, political will, and democratic maturity as the country heads toward the 2028 elections. Civil society, donors, and diaspora communities are demanding accountability, while ordinary citizens balance justice fatigue with survival struggles. Across Africa, Mbayo's case mirrors broader dilemmas of impunity, selective justice, and fragile reconciliation. How Sierra Leone handles him will send signals across West Africa, either reinforcing the culture of coups and silence or proving that even decades later, justice delayed is not justice denied. Thank you for watching The Bold African Voice, BAV. This deportation is more than one man's return. It is a reminder that Africa's past always speaks to its future. Will Sierra Leone seize the chance for accountability or bury history once again under the banner of peace? We'll continue tracking this story and its ripple effects across the continent. Don't forget to like, share, and comment with your thoughts. Subscribe to The Bold African Voice, BAV, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest deep dives into Africa's politics, governance, and future.